Standing by for you to place your rental orders and receive your special $10 off introductory offer. Call now 827-2941.
KSTP-TV, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Channel 5.
Leading the news today, just a half an hour ago in Wayzata, a day-long standoff came to a close. The suspect in the shooting death of a Wayzata police officer turned the gun on himself. 2 other people were wounded in the suspect's shooting spree and rushed to North Memorial Hospital. We'll have a complete report. We'll also take you to Anoka, where Han's Bakery reopened today after being given the all-clear from the health department. And we're going to go to the Minnesota State Fair with media commentator Michael Boyle. That and more coming up in the next half hour on Eyewitness News at 5.
Eyewitness News at 5 with meteorologist Dennis Feltgen and newscaster Cindy Bricado.
Good afternoon, everyone. A 37-year-old Wayzata man who went on a shooting spree and killed a police officer this morning has shot and killed himself. The body of the suspect was discovered about a half an hour ago. Before the suspect, George M. Johnson, turned the gun on himself, he wounded 3 other people. That's a second police officer and 2 bystanders. Tony Vigneri was on the scene of the shooting since this morning. He can give us the details of what unfolded today.
That's right, Cindy. The man, as you know, identified as George Johnson of Wayzata. Johnson was unemployed and 37 years old. It all began around 10 o'clock this morning when an army of police with guns drawn surrounded the Wayzata post office. Inside was Johnson, armed with a .357 Magnum and a .45. A few minutes before, Johnson allegedly shot and killed Wayzata police officer identified as 37-year-old James Anderson. The shooting occurred at Johnson's apartment a few blocks from the post office. From his apartment, Johnson apparently ran up the block to City Hall, where he allegedly fired several more shots, wounding a man and critically wounding a woman. He then fled to the post office, where he told employee James Wood and 4 other employees to line up against the wall.
He was sweating, and he was mad. Very mad about something, I don't know.
He let Wood and the others go, and then Johnson called police himself. When a Minnetonka officer arrived, 36-year-old Kenneth Hatcher, he shot Hatcher in the leg. What was his motive? Police and his friends don't know. One friend told me that he was a quiet man and he never had caused any problems.
But he did have some friends. This wasn't a man who was apparently a recluse of some kind.
No, he did have friends. He had a lot of friends in that area. The employee that I interviewed was his friend for 30 years.
And again, the latest condition on those 3 other people actually who were wounded, a second police officer.
That's correct.
And he was slightly injured.
Slightly injured, and he was shot in the leg. A woman is in critical condition, and another man was shot.
All right, well, we do have, of course, another Eyewitness News crew on the scene, and we'll get to any further details as they become available to us. Thank you, Tony, for that report. 2 escapees from the Anoka County Jail are still at large at this hour. For details on that and for other news of this day, we go to Stan Turner in the newsroom. Good afternoon, Stan.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon, everyone. Busy day indeed. That escape Cindy mentioned happened about 1 o'clock this morning. Officials say the 2 men escaped through a ventilation system in the jail and then crawled through a false ceiling into the courthouse, where they then jumped to the ground. Authorities are looking for 19-year-old Donald Colbar, a white male held for aggravated robbery, and 22-year-old David Watson, also known as Donald Laval Taylor. Watson is a black man held on burglary charges. A Hennepin County grand jury today indicted a Minneapolis man for the August 7th murder of another city man. Donald Amos is charged with first-degree murder in the shooting death of 31-year-old John Coles. That shooting took place at 8th and Emerson in North Minneapolis. Amos, who's now in custody, is scheduled to make his first appearance in Hennepin County District Court tomorrow. Another court hearing, this one today, in the case of Jojo Giorgiani, the New Jersey man convicted of raping a 14-year-old girl. He was released from jail when doctors told a judge that Jojo's weight and poor prison conditions threatened his life. He was released, and that set off a public outcry, especially when an apparently healthy Jojo turned up at boxing matches in Atlantic City. New Jersey officials want him back in jail. Jojo is fighting that, says he's innocent, and in fact feels like he is the victim in all this. There were 6 more suspicious fires in Boston last night, bringing the total there now for this summer to 140. Police did arrest a suspect in one of the fires, a 22-year-old man who allegedly threw a Molotov cocktail through a window of a store. Investigators say they know of no motive at this time. The wave of arson in Boston has caused some $5 million in property damage. Locally again, a Delano man was killed this morning in a head-on collision with a truck in Minneapolis. Authorities say the accident happened at Highway 7 and Kings Point Road, and that was just before 7 this morning. The still unidentified man driving the car was killed outright. The truck driver received minor injuries. The big international story of the day comes from where we thought it would, and that's Poland, where demonstrations in several cities marked this the 2nd anniversary of the Solidarity Labor Federation. And for a preview of ABC's coverage of that and other top national and international stories of the day, here's Frank Reynolds.
Despite a large show of force by Polish police, 50,000 Solidarity supporters defied martial law and marched today to mark the union's 2nd anniversary. Police used concussion grenades, water cannon, and tear gas to disperse crowds in 4 Polish cities. In this country, recent drops in some interest rates have had no effect on home mortgages, still averaging about 17% across the country. And in the Middle East, Israel has shot down a Syrian MiG-25 reconnaissance jet, but the Syrian and PLO evacuations from Beirut have continued. We'll have reports on all these stories on World News Tonight. This is Frank Reynolds in Washington.
And Cindy, there's a glimmer of some good economic news on the home front again here locally, and I'll tell you about that in just a few minutes.
Very good.
Okay.
In other news of this day, the reopening of an Anoka bakery after a food poisoning outbreak. We're going to take a look at what's being done to make sure the food sold in public places is safe to eat. Dr. Michael Breen went along as public health inspectors toured one local restaurant today. We'll have his report when Eyewitness News returns.
You can get a Subaru hatchback with either front-wheel drive or on-demand four-wheel drive. Either way, the most important drive they put you on is in economy drive, with low sticker prices and the kind of mileage that lets you feed your family instead of your car.
Available at Towsley Subaru, White Bear Lake, St. Cloud Subaru, St. Cloud.
Ralph Lauren creates cosmetics and fragrances for all the ways you live. Ralph Lauren Cosmetics for day, for night, and the active life. And Ralph Lauren Fragrances, Lauren for day. And Tuxedo is romantic woman's fragrance for night. Now classic beauty for every moment of your life by Ralph Lauren. The Country Satchel is $21.50 with an $8.50 purchase at the Ralph Lauren counter.
Hans Bakery of Anoka reopened today. It closed voluntarily a week ago when well over 1,000 people got sick from a batch of buttercream frosting. Health officials blame the outbreak on something called Norwalk virus. It's an unusual virus because it can be spread not only through food, but through the air as well. Well, it was late last night when Hans Berkner got the okay to return to his bakery business.
9 o'clock last night we have finally got to start mixing and baking again. And then, well, thanks to the health department, really, I'm sure the inspector's time was up at 5 o'clock, but he really took time out, most like his own time, and stayed till 9 o'clock and helped me get things squared away.
Apparently the customers are glad that Hans is back in business. They talked to our reporters today.
Everyone that I've talked to said they'll be there when the doors open. I'm glad it's open again. We didn't know where to go.
The disease was spread by bakers who came in contact with the Norwalk virus. They now have recovered, and health officials say there is no further danger of spreading it. But that outbreak of food poisoning has focused attention on something we usually take for granted, and that is the purity of the food we eat. Keeping that food pure is the job of hundreds of government inspectors in Minnesota. Medical specialist Dr. Michael Breen is here with more on what the inspectors do.
Cindy, we followed around someone who inspects restaurants. Now, there are thousands of restaurants across the state, from greasy spoons to four-star dining establishments. All those restaurants have to be inspected at least once a year. An inspector's job is very specific, to keep the growth of bacteria and viruses under control. When you eat out, a restaurant inspector is your major protection against food poisoning and hepatitis. We eat 1 out of every 4 meals in a restaurant. As customers, all most of us want is food that tastes good. We take a food's purity for granted, but Dave Goff does not. Goff is the restaurant inspector for Scott, Carver, and Washington counties. Goff sees the parts of a restaurant we never see. He does about 1,300 spot inspections every year. The first thing Goff checks is the restaurant's employees. He says their carelessness is one of the two major causes of food poisoning.
They aren't handling the food product the way it should be handled, or they are sick themselves and they're carrying it over to the food product.
Goff checks to see if employees become nervous and self-conscious. He's also looking for evidence of eating or smoking in the kitchen. Those activities put your hand in touch with your mouth and help spread infection. The second major cause of food poisoning is handling food at the wrong temperature. Goff uses his own thermometer to make sure foods are cooked and maintained at 150 degrees or more. Why does the temperature have to be above 150? What's so important about that temperature?
That's when the bacterial growth it's either stops at that point or else there is a certain amount of killing of the bacteria that occurs after that.
Goff also checks the temperature of foods that are frozen. They have to be kept below 40 degrees. While he's in the freezer, Goff makes sure the meat there is government inspected. Next, Goff checks for signs of rodents and insects. Goff's inspection takes about an hour. Passing that inspection, though, is a full-time job.
Well, weekly we try to do things. We try to keep maintaining things properly. It has to go on weekly. The chef has a daily cleanup schedule right now that they have to do every day.
Cindy, we should mention that this restaurant, the Afton House, got an inspection score of 90, when a passing score is 70 and 85 is considered an exceptional score. So it says a lot for the Afton House that they let us come in there and look behind the scenes on very short notice. I don't think, frankly, that many restaurants would let us do that. I know that they wouldn't.
No. How often do are problems found in a restaurant on average?
About 30% of all restaurants will not get that 70% score. And in that case, most inspectors will be understanding. They'll say, I want you to do this, this, and this, and I'll be back in a month. And they'll keep coming back till the restaurant changes. Now, if the restaurant owners legitimately, if they don't care what happens, they sincerely don't care, they're not listening to what the restaurant inspector says, in that case, an inspector can take away a license, and if the restaurant stays open, despite not having its license, he can go to court and get an injunction.
But how often is a case taken to that extreme? I would think that most of the time they clean up after they're told.
That is very rare, and if you saw the restaurant owner today, who was like someone taking a very important test in college or high school, you would see that they know a lot's on the line and they comply with the law.
Lucky for diners. They do. Thank you, Mike. Weather-wise, kind of a dreary one today. The gray skies did not entice any sunbathers at all among the students registering at the University of Minnesota. Better news on the way for tomorrow, though. Dennis Feltgen has the details in a moment.
Joe Carcione, the Green Grocer, is brought to you today and every weekday by Applebaum's Taste of Freshness.
There are many different varieties of grapes, but there's only two types. There's the American type and the European type. Right here we have the Nibel grape. It's a new variety. It's the American type. It was developed in 1942 as a cross between the Niagara and the Campbell grape. It's a very, very sweet grape, and it comes in kind of early. Now, folks, when you go to select the Nibel, you want to be sure that you select them when they're nice and black, because that means they're ripe and ready. They're going to be very, very sweet. Now, folks, this is one of the European type grapes. Well, most of the grapes that we get are European type, and that includes most of your wine grapes, your Seedless, your Muscat. Right here we happen to have the Queen grape. All grapes are sweet. There's no question about it when they're ripe and ready. But there is a difference between the American type grape and the European type grape. And that is the European type grape is what is known as the cling skin grape. Now you can squeeze it and nothing really happens. Whereas when it comes to the American type grape, we call that the slip skin grape. And when you squeeze that, look what happens. That's exactly what it is. Slip skin grape. This is Joe Carcione, your Green Grocer, with your tip for the day.
Applebaum's puts a lot of special care into choosing and handling the fruits and vegetables you buy, so we can offer you the freshest and finest produce available, from potatoes to pomegranates. Only the freshest, the biggest, and the best. A taste of freshness, only at Applebaum's. In fact, we're so proud of our fruits and vegetables that we offer this extra promise to you. We'll double your money back if you are dissatisfied with the freshness or quality of our produce. Applebaum's Taste of Freshness is our promise to you.
In Minneapolis today, business people and elected officials broke ground for what's going to be the newest addition to the city's skyway system. The new skyway will connect the Hennepin County Government Center with the Pillsbury building. On hand were representatives from the First National Bank, the Pillsbury Center, and the county board members who approved the project. Construction of the skyway will cost $765,000. Most of that's going to be paid by the federal government. About a third of it will be picked up by Hennepin County and private sources. The new skyway is expected to open next January, and that's about the time you really need those skyways. Today, though, well, it was dreary, but really actually pretty warm outside. A little dew pointy, Dennis.
Definitely dew pointy. Dew points were back into the low 60s again today, Cindy. The clouds and the chance of showers at least came right in on cue for the Twin Cities metropolitan area. But most of the Twin Cities rainfall was confined to the southern part. KSTP color radar about 7 o'clock this morning, 7:26 to be exact, had a band of showers and thunderstorms just nicking Scott, Carver, and Dakota County. The more significant activity was farther to the south. In fact, Mankato had some strong winds during the early hours of the morning. No damage was reported. And some more showers were crossing the border from South Dakota. We'll run this time-lapse along for the morning hours, and those showers crossing the border didn't last very long, did they? They faded away before they even made it into Nicollet County. And a live picture right now is not showing any real significant shower or thunderstorm activity within 143 miles of the Twin Cities. It is a different story to the west. National radar map across the country shows some showers and thunderstorms beginning to build now throughout North Dakota and especially South Dakota. Since those are moving from the west to the east, we obviously want to take a look at it. Here's a closer look at it. National Weather Service radar from Huron, South Dakota. And there's what we could call a vigorous line of showers and thunderstorms stretching from the Dakota border very near the city of Pierre, and a couple of those thunderstorms have just become severe. According to the Severe Storms Forecast Center, there is a slight risk of severe weather throughout a large portion of the upper Midwest, including the southwestern third of Minnesota. And within the last couple of moments, a severe weather watch has gone out for the eastern part of South Dakota until 11 o'clock tonight. And again, as I mentioned, those thunderstorms are moving from the west to the east, and we expect a pretty good chance of some showers and thunderstorms later tonight and tomorrow morning. If you're going to the fair this evening, I don't believe you'll have any rain problems. You will have some scattered clouds around. Right now it's mostly cloudy. It's 73 degrees at 5 o'clock. There's that dew point up to 64. It's a little muggy. Humidity 73%. Winds are southeast, and the air pressure is falling just a little bit. Remember that area of low pressure where we were talking about yesterday? We expected it to move into western Minnesota. Well, it's in the eastern Dakotas. It's lagging about 6 to 12 hours behind what we thought at this time. So it's going to throw our clearing skies off until about tomorrow afternoon rather than tomorrow morning. But this entire system is moving on to the east, and there's a large area of high pressure behind it. And if everything goes according to plan, it looks like we'll have a span of about 2, 3, maybe even 4 days of partly cloudy skies and mild temperatures. But for tonight, we're going to call it variable cloudiness with a chance of some showers and thunderstorms, but it'll be well after sunset, lows of 60 to 65 with a south wind. And for tomorrow, there's a chance of showers in the morning, but I believe the skies will become partly cloudy by afternoon. High temperatures will be 75 to 80. The winds will be a drier wind, and it'll be from the northwest at 5 to 15 miles per hour. Cindy will have more on the weather information, including a look at that Labor Day weekend, coming up at 6.
Really? Hasn't been too bad a week, though, at least so far for the fair. It sounds like it's going to end up being a nice one. Well, speaking of that, you can count on the Minnesota State Fair to have not only pretty good weather this time of year, but lots of food, rides, exhibits, animals, and people. The fair also becomes an annual common ground for most of the Twin Cities' major media organizations. And media commentator Michael Boyle took a look.
Media at the State Fair is an old tradition, and it continues. Most of the leading radio and television stations in the Twin Cities are represented here in some way or another. It's also a terrific opportunity for fairgoers to get themselves seen on TV. Each of the 4 commercial television stations in the Twin Cities has an exhibit or space of one kind or another. Some of them broadcast live from the fair. Newscasts originate from this exhibit at times. And a segment of KSTP-TV's Good Company is broadcast from the fair, featuring culinary concoctions by Craig Olson, prepared out in the open air.
You're wide open here. If somebody decides to walk onto the set during the show and grab a tomato or a pepper, how would you deal with that?
Well, I would hopefully try and get rid of them. I mean, what can you do if someone walks in? But you're friendly and, hope everything works fine and all that.
Other segments originated from this cow barn and from a swine judging event. Only at the state fair would this be media. Nearby, the hosts of PM Magazine did a take for a promotional announcement. Local reporters find plenty to cover, whether it's the fair itself or politicians on the stump for the coming primaries. A cameraman hurries through the crowd to get another shot for a feature story. The major newspapers also have exhibits, as well as the Twin Cities' newest pay TV station.
You know, it's amazing. I haven't seen this many televisions in one place since I was at Ward's or Penny's.
The radio stations are everywhere, pouring out a mixed bag of music and talk. The music and the DJs draw a curious crowd, eager to see what their favorites look like.
Does this disc jockey look anything like you thought he'd look?
No, he doesn't.
What did you think he'd look like?
I didn't think he'd have a beard or mustache or anything like that. I thought he'd have dark hair, dark wavy hair or something.
Some fans bring their own sound systems to hear the music both ways. Many of the stations have promotional items available, like these paper TV antennas and these shopping bags to carry prizes and purchases around in. One radio station distributed running shorts. Indeed, media at the fair is nearly as commonplace as Pronto Pup stands and sky rides.
Who knows, if you come down here, you might even wind up on television.
Oh, no!
I'm Michael Boyle, KSTP-TV media commentator at the Minnesota State Fair. Wow!
All right. Well, Twin Cities radio station WLOL-FM has been sold. Speaking of media, a part owner of the station says that the buyers are a group of investors from Indiana and Chicago. They call themselves now Emmis Broadcasting of Minnesota. The sale price was not disclosed, but reportedly it's the most ever paid for an FM station in the Twin Cities. Up next, a live report from Carolyn Brookter on some St. Paul city employees who say they may hit the picket lines tomorrow morning. Stay with us.
Are you full? I am. What a forecast.
But summer will not come back by popular demand, right?
I don't think so.
The end. Bye-bye. Thank you, Paul. And next on 11 News Extra, a battle of notes. Or should we say notes? The battle for listeners coming up.
Gentlemen, this is Dennis James with a tip. If you like expensive clothes but don't like to spend a bundle of money for them, come to the Clothing Distribution Center. You'll find thousands of new fall suits with the world's top labels for about half of what you'd expect to pay. Like pure wool-vested suits for $99.90. Famous designer suits, $149.90. And Clothing Distribution Center can fit almost any man, big and tall men, too. Clothing Distribution Center. It's the Minneapolis miracle.
Watching television is becoming more complicated. Every week, there's local programming, network, cable, and pay TV. All those channels, all those shows, all those choices. To help you watch the best that's on, pick up a copy of the best, TV Guide, with detailed listings, expanding cable coverage, and in-depth articles. Pick up this week's TV Guide. TV Guide helps you decide.
Losing your job is no reason to lose your good health. Just being unemployed is rough enough. If you're unemployed, no longer covered by health insurance or welfare benefits, and have a clear and present medical